on the device locally, that would require significantly more administration than, if they were constantly refreshing the content. So I would suspect I don't know the amount of time or effort they put into that component, but it would seem that if their content could be refactored to be more online, it would be better than if their content resided and required massive uploads on a regular basis.
Correct. Yep.
Understood. But if you run into bandwidth issues and your ads aren't running, you're not getting paid.
Ta-da! Yeah, obviously. But I would suggest that Tom, correct me if I'm wrong. Was that from an AT&T perspective, they solved that problem by managing the content locally and not storing the content in a regional? But obviously, they have a different use case, and their ads are running differently. But am I thinking clearly when I say that the content should be refactored so that it could be administered in a single source in a centralized manner?
Yes, absolutely. And that was the key. And then as they grew and developed, they not only did they distribute content from a centralized source, but then they also started breaking it into regional and triggering it based on what was happening. And now they've progressed from centralized control now to centralized control out to content that is distributed based on trigger points in each store location. So now they've gotten very sophisticated, but you're on the right path, Roy. Start with centralized control, making sure that it's in a central point, not trying to load it onto stuff locally. That's done for backup purposes only now.
Okay. So I think we're back to how do we create a managed network over the top of the existing environment so that we can transition to a managed network on an SOC environment with as little pain as possible. And I think I'm hearing a media player, a new media player with Wi-Fi capability is what they're thinking of today. Evan, is that a good summation of what you're thinking?
That's currently what they just shifted to. I'll tell you, it's certainly from an executive level, they are pushing develop an SOC solution. That's where they want to go.
Yeah, and that would make perfect sense, but they're getting pushback from their technical teams. Yeah?
Correct. They have concerns about that. I think we touched on this briefly the last time.
Yeah.
One of their biggest things. So keep in mind, getting into a patient room, it's not easy. They have very small windows. They've got to get technicians. They typically get 30-minute windows. So getting somebody out there and scheduled for a maintenance call. So when they get out there, they don't have time to take down a TV, put up a new TV. As you said, most of these, they get out there, it's on the wrong input or the HDMI plugs unplugged. They come out with a new media player. They swap out the media player. They ship it back to their warehouse for Q&A and go, oh, there's nothing wrong with the media player. So yes, having this connected care, I think, is huge. It's going to obviously, if we talked about the amount of service calls they have, reducing that, being able to identify and hopefully correct the situation most of the times remotely, is going to be a significant interest to Patient Point. But again, how do we get there? I will tell you, we created a specific version of connected care specifically for Patient Point for the UR series and the PK series. So they could do that. But again, currently these displays are not online, and you would not be able to remotely update. So in order to implement the connected care, you would have to get them updated. So now you're talking about getting into every single one of these physicians' offices, patient rooms, and updating the firmware so they can be connected care compatible, and then connecting them to a media player that can run Wi-Fi. So,
and what is that media player that they've started deploying? Is that the BrightSign?
No, they've gone through different implementations. At one point, they were running BrightSign, so it's possible there's BrightSign media players out in the field today. I'm sure there are, but today they are using a custom one that they've developed internally.
And did they order thousands of those or hundreds of thousands of those? I'm trying to figure out why they have 4,100 pallets of inventory.
I don't know. I don't know how many media players they can. I can tell you when we shifted models at the end of last year, they brought in a lot of our inventory because there was concern about they get nervous when we transition models. They want to make sure ours 232 coding hasn't changed. So there's usually a couple months of evaluation before they start implementing a new model into the field. So I think a large portion of that may be excessive inventory on TVs because of this transition period with the model change.
And would you say that the new management, the new CFO, I don't know if there's a new CFO, but there's certainly new executives after the acquisition, have a similar appetite for CapEx and saying that, we're willing to carry tens of millions of dollars of inventory?
I don't think that's their preference, no, but I can't, I haven't had a specific conversation with the CFO regarding that.
All right. So where are we stuck, Vinesh? What do we need to put in our plan and convince them? Are you ready with the mental architecture of how we could make this happen? Okay,
So,
top of the hour, 7 minutes. We have 7 minutes together, gentlemen.
Yeah, so it's still right. We need to think the best solution what we can propose to them. Yeah, right. If I say that currently, if I are prepared to respond something, I would say I need some time, right?
Yeah. Okay. Do you have any other questions for JR that we should document?
Currently, I would say no. Okay, that we have, we can say everything what we need to know. Okay, James, you have anything from your?
Just kind of a lingering question in the back of my mind. Is there any advantage at all to an AppSpace or a Corbett handling their content management side?
I can tell you AppSpace is a WebOS partner. So you could run AppSpace as you can BroadSign. I can't speak to the preference or handling, what they're looking for, price competitiveness or anything like that, but you could use AppSpace. That would be an option.
Okay. Thank you.
Again, do you want to flip from a CMS solution? I know there was concerns about that maybe over time, or is that something you want to flip? But regardless, it doesn't solve any of the problems of still needing our WebOS platform for all the displays that are out in the field as of today.
I think it's going to have to be a transformation plan. Obviously, a day one plan and then a transformation plan.
Yep. But I do think that there has to be a focus on a regional development plan that can quickly get those screens connected. Even there's 145,000 of them. They're not going anywhere for 5 years, 6 years. They say they have a 10-year life cycle, so they probably have a 10-year depreciation schedule on the existing fleet. But I got to run some numbers on what 32,000 service calls looks like for 145 devices. To me, it seems like an excessive failure rate that would have a financial justification of getting that remote in. But I'm not the first to think of that. I'm sure that they've thought of that, and they haven't gone that direction. And I'm looking for the roadblock.
I will tell you, we started 2 years ago the conversation with Connected Care, with SOC. At that point, that's when the ownership change happened last year. I think a lot of things got put in the back burner. So I'm sure, yes, Roy, I think agreed that those conversations have happened internally. I think they understand that. But yeah, that's what has been some of the delay.
All right, but you still think that story will resonate? You still think that if we align to that strategic vision, have a transformation plan in place that makes sense, that gets them quickly to a place where they can use their existing screens and fleet, but not continue to dig a hole for themselves with every new screen they put out in the field. That's kind of
I
the
would assume
high-level
so.
pitch.
Again, yeah. I personally haven't seen the RFP, so I don't know if this RFP is exclusively about just, hey, we need someone to run our distribution and installation, or
No.
And internally they're making those decisions on tech and where they want to go, or if
Yeah.
this
They're
is
looking for
a
a-
full
they're
handling
looking
everything.
for
I don't know that. So
They're looking for a partner to handle everything,
End to end,
Right.
yeah.
mhm.
end to end. They say that's preferred. They would do a best in class, but they really don't want to. They want to get this in the hands of somebody. And even if I lowered the cost of certain elements, right, I'm not going to be able to lower the cost of, having a 1 hour window to get somebody into and having to dispatch them to do so. That's an expensive solution. And if I have to do that 40,000 times a year in the existing fleet, somewhere in the neighborhood of 30% of the existing fleet is failing on an annual basis, that's a lot of money.
Yes, and that's, and I can tell you, we had an issue with some of our displays and we had to get out in the field and repair them, and it was beyond challenging trying to get in the specified time window. It was, it's a doctor's office is not an easy place to get time in. Your tech
No,
shows
every-
up a half hour
Every
late, their
minute,
window shut. So,
every minute that they're not in that room billing, they're running closer to a red line of unprofitability. So they're
Yep.
every 7 minutes
got
they're
it.
going to be turning somebody else into that room. It's simple as that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So, all right, team. Thank you. We have 1 minute with Tom. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy your lunch, Tom. I didn't get an order, but
Really appreciate it.
I
That
really
wasn't my
appreciate
lunch
this.
order. That was Evan's lunch order. So,
Was it?
yeah.
So,
But I apologize for the technical difficulties this morning, guys. But if you need any else, let us
I'm
know.
sure
Glad
we're
to
going to
help.
need something else. We're going to start throwing some darts and putting together some messages, and we're going to need to bounce those ideas off. And right now, Evan's our best source for intel. So we appreciate your time, everybody.